Hey, Connor here with Fishbowl. The purpose of this video is to walk through the bill of materials module and how we can create bill of materials using a spreadsheet. We have two spreadsheets that will do the exact same thing, and you just choose whichever one makes the most sense for you to use. The first one is bill of materials. So if I click on File, Export, or Import, we have these two options, bill of materials and bill of material details. They do the exact same thing. There is no difference between them. Bill of materials has a dual header, and bill of material details has a single header. I'll walk through both and what makes them different, and so you can decide what you want to use. Before I get into that, I am going to talk about how bill of materials work inside of Fishbowl so that you have an idea of what those different fields are, and then we'll take a look at it in the spreadsheet. So if you already know everything you need to know about bill of materials, you can skip that first section and move on to the two different spreadsheet sections to decide which one you want to use. Okay, so a bill of material in Fishbowl is simply a recipe. It's a way to tell Fishbowl, I need to make something and this is how I make it. And so I've drummed up a fake example here. I have a notebook. I'm creating a notebook. I create one, and to create it, I need a cover for the front. I need a cover for the back. I need a 9-inch spiral metal binding, and I need 150 6x9 lined sheets of paper. Okay. Now this item here is actually a bill of material. This is something that I have to make first. I have maybe the spiral binding in feet, and I need to cut 9 inches to say, okay, I'm making 9 inches for this bill of material. And so here I can click to say, hey, this is a stage item, and I tell Fishbowl that in order to create this, I need to use this bill of material to um, for this bill of material, if that makes sense. So it's like a bill of material within a bill of material. You make the cut spiral binding before you can include it as one of the raw goods for the finished notebook, if that makes sense. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and save that change here. And so let's talk about some of these fields. First is on the General tab, and we'll just talk about up here first, then we'll go down to the items in a second. So up here we've got your number. This is typically going to match the name of, or the part number of the finished good that you're creating. It doesn't have to. You can name it anything you want to, but it makes the most sense, I think, to have it set to the part number that you're creating. The description, again, whatever you want. You can see I just created sort of a general description, create a notebook 9x6. This could be more specific or less specific, whatever you like. It is a required field though. You cannot leave that blank. Okay. Down below that is an auto create slider, and this is telling Fishbowl when should I automatically create this bill or a manufacturer order for this bill of material. And so if you are, let's say you're short, maybe you're selling 10 of something and you have 7 in your warehouse right now. If you have this set to never, then Fishbowl does nothing. You just have to manually create manufacturer orders, which works for some people. You can have it set to short quantity, and what this means is, okay, if I'm out of stock by 3, in this case I sold 10, I only have 7, then it's going to create a manufacturer order for me for just the quantity of 3. If I have it set to order quantity, Fishbowl sees, okay, well, you're short, and so I'm going to create a manufacturer order for all 10. Even though you only needed 3, when you have it set to order quantity, it creates an MO for all 10. Always create will do exactly that. It just, regardless of if you have it or not, it will always create a manufacturer order to replace what it is that you're consuming. And then a build to order pops up a window on your screen that asks you, do you want to pull from existing inventory or do you want to create new? Keep in mind, if you're integrating with an e-commerce platform that's importing orders, you cannot have it set to build to order. Technically, you can. It's not going to break. It just, the window that pops up is triggered when you are creating the sales order and entering the line item on the order. And so imported orders can't trigger that window to pop up. So just keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to the next tab. That's details. Details, oh, and there's one more thing. That's this active checkbox, true or false. This is just saying, is this on or off? Like, is this an active recipe or is it something that you want to get rid of? Maybe you're not using it anymore. Okay, we also have this URL field. This is a free-form field that you can use a URL for anything you want. Then we got details. We got a revision field. If you keep track of revision numbers on your bill of materials, you can keep track of it here if you want to. Fishbowl will not maintain a historical record of your bill of material. It will for historical builds, but not for the bill of material itself. So you may want to export it and save it somewhere safe if you're changing a bill of material. Down below that, we've got a category field. This relates to the calendar module. So if you're using the calendar module, you can create different categories to say, hey, this color represents this. And then it just populates on your calendar in a different color so you can quickly see what's coming up, or maybe you have different families of different tasks grouped together by color. And so that way you can quickly see, like, what do you have on your plate for manufacturing today or for whatever it may be. That's category here. Okay, then we've got pick only from work order location or bill of material item location. This one I rarely see used, but if set, oh, look, it says right there, if set and there's no inventory on the work order location, then the pick will show those items as short. So basically it's saying if you tell Fishbowl specifically to only pick the goods from the specified location that we set on the bill of material, that's here, we'll get back to this in a minute, then it will show it as short if you don't have it at that location. So that's what this checkbox does. I don't think I've ever had anyone click that, but it works well for some people. Okay, down below that is statistics. The big ones here are going to be estimated time. You can set this estimated time if you want to, and it kind of helps to help you predict how much time you're going to need to complete these bill of materials or these manufacturer orders as you're generating them. Okay, down below that we have a notes field. Feel free to keep notes there if you want. Next, we have instructions. We won't be talking about instructions in this video, at least in the CSV, but the instructions tab is a place for you to create step-by-step instructions inside of Fishbowl for the person who is using the work order to create the finished good. A lot of companies that I work with will not need Fishbowl to be the place that tells workers what they need to do. They have an external system or a printed sheet of paper, or the worker just knows what to do, and so they don't need a system that will tell them, do this, do this, do this. If you do need that, though, you can create steps and say, okay, step one is, pick, or no, not pick, let's see, assemble, or maybe it would be cutting. Cut the metal binder, whatever, sure. Step two would be to stack covers and pages and bind with metal binding. I don't know. So you can create these different steps to help remind the workers what comes next and help people sort of follow a process. Keep in mind every step that you create creates 3 clicks for an individual in the work order module. And so it may be that if you're creating like 12 steps or 50 steps, that's 150 clicks if you've created 100 or 50 different steps for somebody to follow. So just keep that in mind. It can slow down the process. It's really good for somebody that keeps forgetting something. One of my last companies I worked for, I forgot to put a sticker on the back of the product, and we would ship it out, and then I would have to mail a sticker to Europe next week because I forgot to put a sticker on it. And so a pop-up would come up and say, did you put a sticker on it? And I have to click, yes, I did, right? So that's what an instruction could be used for too, as a helpful reminder to make sure people are actually doing what they need to do. Okay, then we have default locations. This is you telling Fishbowl where you build this thing. So if you have like 5 or 10 different production lines in your warehouse, and you specifically make notebooks at production line number 1, then I can tell Fishbowl this is specifically where I create that main stock. Okay, wherever it is that you do. You don't need to use it. It's an optional field. I think it's pretty cool. The nice part of using a default location is that Fishbowl will pick all of your raw goods to that default location, whatever you set to. So it makes the pick destination more intuitive to use, or easier to use, I should say. Okay, then we have memo. You can keep memos about this if you want to, and then we have a custom, if you have any custom fields. I don't have any on my example. Okay. Let's go to the metal binding. I'm going to set that to short quantity so that it works correctly with this stage item here. Now let's talk about what's down here. So down here is how we tell Fishbowl what it is that we're making. And so I'm creating a finished good. And in order for me to create this finished good, I need to consume all of these goods here. So on the right-hand side, I'm telling Fishbowl what part number it is that I'm building. That's the notebook 9x6. And then a description. I'm creating a notebook 9x6. So you can call this whatever you want. It doesn't need to say exactly the part description. It could be anything that you like it to say. And then the quantity and the unit of measure that I'm creating at the end. So maybe your batch quantity is going to be 150 notebooks. I don't make just one at a time. Think of it this way. If I'm making cookies in my kitchen, theoretically, I could pull just just the right amount of raw goods to create one single cookie. It's possible. I just don't know how to pick 0.17 eggs to make one single cookie in my kitchen. It doesn't make sense to me. It won't make sense to your workers. And so set your batch quantity to what makes sense. And so for me, a notebook, that makes sense. I'm making one notebook and I need one cover and one back cover and 150 sheets of paper. Makes sense to everybody. But if the way that you produce your goods is at 1,000 at a time, then I can create my finished good quantity to be 1,000 at a time, and then Fishbowl, my manufacturer orders will be in batches of 1,000. And so if I could say, hey, we're making 1,000 right now, or maybe we're making 5,000 right now, I'll just tell Fishbowl in the manufacturer order. Okay. So consider the raw goods, what they're picking when you're deciding what your batch quantity is. My usual recommendation is the smallest batch size you would ever normally do. Set that to be your quantity for your finished good. Okay. Down below that, we have raw goods. Okay, and this is me defining to Fishbowl what goes into making that notebook 9x6. So in order for me to make it, I need a front cover, a back cover, one of each. I need the spiral binding, 9-inch, pre-cut, and I need lined paper, 150 sheets. So let's go through this. So here, my notebook cover, I defined the part number that goes into it. So I need to pull one front 6x9 cover. I need to, and here's a description. Again, this can be anything you want. Quantity 1, unit measure each. We have this price adjustment field. If you want to adjust the price, maybe if we use this option, it's going to cost an additional $10 because it's a special notebook cover. I don't know, whatever. It's a custom notebook cover, and you want to charge an additional $10, you can. This is mostly applicable with variable and optional groups, and so we'll go through that in just a minute too. Okay. Next is a pick location. This is telling Fishbowl, when I pick this specific raw good, I want to pick from this specific location. For example, again, that company with the stickers, we were manufacturing digital pressure gauges, and we had a bin full of adapters up front, like 1/4-inch NPT adapters, that was sitting on the production line. And then we had a huge amount of adapters in the back in the warehouse. That was our bulk inventory. Well, when I make the pressure gauge, I didn't want to have to walk back to the warehouse to get one adapter every single time. And so instead, we just had 1,000 in the back, and then I had like 50 up front in a bin with all the adapters that I would use. Okay, and then in those adapters, I want to tell Fishbowl to pull the inventory from the 50 I have up front rather than from the bulk in the back. And so by using this here, I can tell Fishbowl that, hey, specifically for this 6x9 front cover, I want you to pull the inventory from this specific bin location, if there is one. In my example, I don't have one. Okay, that's how pick locations work. And then we have a custom field. Again, if you have any custom fields here, I have no need for them, so it's just blank. Okay. The back cover is much the same as the front. The lined paper is much the same as everything else. The only difference is you'll notice I have 150 here instead of quantity 1. And then the big one that's different is this spiral binding 9-inch cut. So what this is doing is it's actually pulling a 9-inch cut piece of metal that I have pre-cut and keep in stock somewhere else. Or there's another process that I have to do to create this metal spiral binding 9-inch cut you can see here. And the way that I make this is I would get maybe I have 12 feet of this metal binding material, and I have to cut 9 inches in order to use it for this bill of material. Okay. If you would create things in stages, like where you do, okay, I'm going to make a whole 5 pounds of chocolate chips, and then tomorrow I'll consume one of those 5 pounds into a batch of cookies that I'm making, and then I'll have another 4 pounds of chocolate chips left over. That's a good example of how you might utilize stages effectively. And so in Fishbowl here, I've told Fishbowl that I pre-cut these, keep it in stock, and then I need to pull from this item. Okay, and that's actually this bill of material, which we'll look at in just 2 seconds. Actually, we'll look at it right now. Just kidding. So here I'll go to my metal spiral binding, and this bill of material is very simple. I'm creating this 9-inch cut, and I consume 9 inches of this part here. That's it. That's the whole bill of material. And I have it set to short quantity. Okay, so that's basically how this works. 15 minutes to walk through is probably not enough time for you to get a full understanding of the bill of materials, so you can work with your implementation specialist or schedule training if you need additional help with bill of materials, but hopefully that makes sense. Now, creating, one more thing I want to talk about is the variable quantity and option groups. And so here, let's go back to my notebook. Maybe I have unlined paper. That's an option I want to give my customers, okay? Okay, so here, I'm going to actually remove this line item here, and I'm going to click New, and here it gives me a list of different options for what I want to do. Maybe I'm adding an additional finished good. Maybe there's multiple finished goods for this bill of material. You can have that in Fishbowl if you want. In this case, it's just another raw good. Okay, then I have to tell Fishbowl what part I'm selecting. So let's do the lined paper. So I think it was notebook lined paper. There you go. And I'm going to consume 150, but this is actually an option group. And in the option group, I'm going to tell Fishbowl what type of paper it is. It could be unlined or lined. So paper type. Okay, and I'm going to set this as the default. By default, I will always use lined paper for my bill of material. Okay, we also have a variable quantity. Maybe I'm giving the option for my customer to select, actually I just want 100 sheets of paper, or I want 300 sheets of paper. So I can say, okay, the minimum is 100 and the maximum is 300, but the default is 150. Okay, and then what's going to happen now is when I enter this on a sales order or creating a manufacturer order, a window's going to pop up and ask me, do you want to do 100? Or somewhere between 100 or 300, or do you want to just use the default 150? And then it's going to ask me, which one do you want to use? Do you want to use unlined paper or lined paper? And that's basically how that works. Okay, we'll click finish here. Let me add another one. That's going to be the unlined paper. $100 or $300, and it's part of the option group paper type. Just like that. And so now you can see how those look on the spreadsheet. Okay. So now that you have an idea of how a bill of material works, let's take a look at the two spreadsheets to get an idea of how those work to create new bill of materials or add them all in bulk. So I'm going to export this out. I recommend, if this is your first time doing this and you're not quite sure, create the first one in the UI just like we did, because the tools in the UI make sense, and then export it out to a spreadsheet so that you can see how Fishbowl formats it so you don't have to guess. So we're going to start with the bill of material first, and then we'll go to bill of material details second. And so in this one, you can see, like I told you, there's a dual header system. And so we have a flag that represents the bill of material, and then we have a flag that represents the item on the bill of material. Okay, let's make these bold perhaps. Okay, so column A is telling Fishbowl, is this a bill of material, like a new recipe, or is this an item on the bill of material? Okay, and it's a way for me to say, hey, this is a new recipe, or this is an item within that recipe just above it. Pretty simple, right? And so here, let's start with just the bill of material flag. Okay, and then we'll come back to the items in just a second. I'm going to label those so you can clearly see what they are. Okay, so let's start with blue. So I'm identifying this as a new bill of material, and it's going to be the bill of material that creates the 9-inch cut metal binding. Okay, so there's my number. I'm identifying that as whatever you want to call it, and so I've called it metal spiral binding 9-inch cut. That's this field here. Actually, it's this field here. Then I've got a description. That's this field here. Then I've got whether or not it's active, true or false. That's this checkbox there. Then I've got the revision. That's on the details tab. Calendar category, I left mine blank, so this one's blank. Then the auto create type, that's this field here. Okay, QuickBooks class name, I am not using QuickBooks class tracking, and so I've left that field blank. I don't even know if it's visible because I'm not using it at all, so it's not, yeah, I can't even see it in my database right now. Then note, if you have any notes, that's this field here. a URL. If you have any URL, I didn't put one. That's this field here. And then we have the default location, which I set to nothing. I don't have it set, but I can set it to main stock if I want. The way that you would do that here is I would say stock to tell Fishbowl, hey, this is going to be in my main stock location. If you have multiple location groups, then you would see additional fields here. It would say DL, second, whoops, DL third if you had multiple location groups. In my case, like I said, I don't. Does that make sense? Oh, as if you can answer. Let's delete those. Okay, the next field down is asking, or for the items. This is a flag that says, okay, give me a description of the items that are going into this bill of material here. And so here's my first one. I am identifying the first item. Here's the description of the item. That is this field here, this description. Then it's asking me, is it a raw good or a finished good? So this is a finished good. That is right here. Then it's asking me, okay, what's the part number? The part number is right here. Then it's asking me, what's the quantity that you're creating? I'm creating one each. That's this field here. Okay, then it's asking me, is it a variable quantity, true or false? Okay, remember we were talking about variable quantities. Down here you can see I've got some trues. We'll come down to that in just a second. And so it's basically asking me, is this something that can be a variable quantity? Well, for a finished good, no, you can't have a variable quantity for a finished good, but for a raw good, you can. Okay, and so if it was a variable quantity, I would have said true. So here, let's freeze that first row so we can see what it is. Let's view, freeze, just like that. There you go. Okay, so here you can see I put true for that lined paper, and I put true for that unlined paper. And then the next one is saying, okay, give me the minimum quantity. That's 100. Give me the max quantity. That's 300. Okay, that's it. Pretty simple. Next is saying, is it an option group? And so I said, yes, it is an option group. And I told Fishbowl, whoops, it's a different group. I said it's part of the paper type option group. So you need to create that in advance before you can just add it to your spreadsheet. Okay. Then we have option group and option group prompt, which in my case are the exact same. You watched me create that on the video. Then we have is group default. So I've told Fishbowl that true, my lined paper is my default, and false, my unlined paper is not my default. Okay. Then we've got price adjustment. If there is a price adjustment, maybe it costs an additional $10 or $5 or whatever if they use the unlined paper, and you can put the price adjustment here. Keep in mind this is per unit, and so if actually I need to test that. I'm not totally sure if it's per unit. It might be the whole line as a total. But anyways, you can create a price adjustment here to say if you choose the unlined paper, I'm going to charge you $5 more. Okay, next is it a one-time item? We didn't talk about that actually. That is this field here, one-time item. Think of it this way. If I'm manufacturing, let's say it's this. I'm creating a whole bunch of notebooks, and I'm going to open a jar of paint, and I'm going to paint a line across the front. I don't know, whatever, just an example. But once I've opened the jar of paint, I have to throw it away after I'm done. I can't save it for whatever reason. I don't know what you manufacture, but maybe that's something that applies to you. Basically, I can say, regardless of how many I'm making in my manufacture order, this is specifically a one-time item, meaning I don't need to have more than just the one. So one jar of paint will supply enough for all of my batch that I'm creating right now. Okay, so true or false, you can see all of mine are set to false. Okay, then the next one is column O. This is saying, is it a stage? And so the only stage I have is actually here. This is the 9-inch cut spiral binding. And so I said true, it is a stage. And the stage bill of material number is the bill of material number for, you guessed it, the metal 9 binding 9-inch cut. So you can see those two fields match. So I've told Fishbowl, yes, this is a stage item, and in order for me to create it, it pulls from this bill of material that we've already created. You can see it's right here. Okay? Then we have configuration sort order. That is on the bill of material and your raw goods here. There's a sort order field that says, okay, this comes first, that comes second. So yeah, we'll save the changes. And so here you can see it's cover 1, back cover 2, and then spiral binding 3, and then the paper is last. And so on the spreadsheet, that's the order that's popping up in here. Okay, that's how this spreadsheet works. The next spreadsheet is much the same. Let's take a look at it real fast. Export, bill of material details. Okay, and so this one now, instead of being a dual header, it's just a single header. That's all it does. And so here we've got bill of material details all the way up to column I. Oh, we'll make it blue so it matches our last. And then we have the items on the bill of material details listed here. This makes the most sense to more people. I see more people using this than I see people using the other one. And so all that I'm doing here is I start with my bill of material number, my bill of material description, whether or not it's active, true or false, what's the auto create set to, revision number, calendar category, you get the idea. And so for every line item on the bill of material, it will just be a repeated row. Everything is just copied and pasted straight across. Okay, let's save that right here. Okay, scooching over here. Okay, and now we're in the item type. And I told Fishbowl, okay, first is a finished good. I'm creating, and remember that's the item type, then the item description, and then the part number that I'm creating. Those are all matching these fields here. And the quantity, that's these fields here. Then it's asking, is this a variable quantity? You can't have that for a finished good, but for my raw good here, you can see that's false, but here I have it set to true. And if it's true, then my minimum and max, then I have my minimum and maximum quantity set there too. Okay, then we have option group. Is it part of an option group? And I'm going to say just what the group is. So yes, it is, and here's the group and the prompt. And then is it the default of that group, true or false? So for my lined paper, you can see that is true and false for those two. Okay, price adjustment, if it applies. Is it a one-time item, true or false? We talked about that a second ago. And then is it a stage? The only one that I have a stage for is that last item, which is, I froze the wrong sheet, but that is the, this is the metal spiral binding 9-inch cut. And so if it is a stage, I'm going to tell Fishbowl what the stage, or what the bill of material number is, which is this one. I come over here and say this is the bill of material that creates that item. And then you have your sort order. So you can see they both do the exact same thing, and it's just up to you to choose which one you want to use. Hopefully that helps, makes more sense. Feel free to leave a comment or email me or your implementation specialist if you need any help with that, and we'll be happy to assist. All right, have a great rest of your day. Thanks.